So I turned off the light and I thought, something's in this room. Something is in this room. And I turned on the light. I didn't see anything, but I felt it. I felt as if something dark and horrible was at the foot of my bed. I couldn't see anything. I took the holy water out and I put holy water on my bed. And I still didn't feel safe. Hi everybody. Time for another archetype video. Today I'm doing something a little outrageous. It's October, and as I was walking around my neighborhood, I saw all of these decorations going up already for Halloween. I mean, Halloween's not to the end of the month, but and this one house has this gargantuan ghost. I mean, gargantuan. I mean, and I was watching it, and when you walk by, it's animated, so I don't know how they do this, but it talks to you as you go by, and it's supposed to scare you or whatever. But that got me thinking about the ghost archetype, the ghost. And I remember when I was a kid, there was a cartoon called Casper the Friendly Ghost. And I remember watching that as a child, I think. It was whatever. But I mean, that was, kind of like the friendly, invisible ghost. But we are fascinated with, there's no doubt about it, the space between worlds, let's put it that way. The space between the physical, the invisible, and the sacred. The domain. I mean, there are TV shows about being a ghost hunter. Now, let me just say at the onset that what I find so fascinating, I find, all kinds of things fascinating about this, but one is that when people do these like ghost hunting things, they never, they're looking for things moving and sounds and all kinds of ghoulish things. But they never speculate, like, well, if there is a ghost, what does that mean in terms of the afterlife? What does that suggest? That we live on after this life? And if we do live on, does that mean anything about how we should live this life before we get to that life? Now, full disclosure, I actually saw a ghost. I was doing a workshop. David and I were doing a workshop in Scotland at, dare I admit this, Turnberry, which is now owned by, but at the time it wasn't. It was still in Scottish hands. And I was crossing the lobby, going into the dining room, and I see this figure walk very fast. I saw this face, and I thought, that is the most pale human being I have ever seen in my life. And then as my eyes went down, I realized there's no body. It was just this head and neck, and then it was gone. I'm telling you, clear as I'm looking at my computer. So I went up to the gentleman at the reception desk, and the British, the Scottish, they absolutely enchant me with the way in which they conduct themselves over things that you might be like, oh my God. So I said, is this place haunted? Do you have ghosts here? And he was busy. He's like this. He said, yes, ma'am. I mean, you'd think that I'd say, do you have coffee here? Yes, ma'am. I mean, it was that. And I said, I think I just saw a ghost walk across your lobby. He looks up, he says, yes, ma'am. And I said, oh. I said, so, do you know him? I mean, and that's when he told me that Turnberry had been used during World War I as a hospital for soldiers returning from the war. And which, of course, leads to this whole association of a ghost being a soul who has died but not left the incarnation, is suspended between incarnations for various reasons, incomplete. In theory, the reasons for this could run from a violent death, a feeling of murder, that you didn't see it coming, as it were, unfinished business, which creates this state of ghosthood, this state of, I'm not done with this life. It ended too abruptly, and I need to finish my unfinished business. Now, I have to say that all of those theories, and theories such as that, all give credence to the higher, more sophisticated spiritual teachings that you complete your life because your life has purpose and meaning. Every life has purpose and meaning, and that it's important to complete your life and to go through a ritual of completion before you die. That it is important to have your last confession, to have the last rites, to have some kind of ritual of closure, to have a closure with your loved ones, to say what you need to say, to take all of your fragments with you. I remember when I was in my early 20s, and I spent several months in Alaska, and I had the opportunity to meet this woman named Rachel. I only met her for an afternoon. I was dropped off at her cabin. And I just showed up. And when I walked in, one half of it was all done in Russian iconology, which I recognized because of my background. She had a samovar and all the Russian Orthodox church art. But on this side, it was all Inuit, which I didn't recognize. And these were her two heritages. So we sat down and we had tea from the samovar. And she started to tell me about herself, this fascinating life of someone who was from Russian heritage, from Native American heritage. And then she said that she was going to a potlatch dinner that night. I didn't know what that was. She said, well, a member of the tribe had announced that his time to die was coming. And so a ceremony was being held in which he was giving away all of his earthly belongings, including, now this is fascinating to me, including anything that needed to be completed by someone else because he would not be around to complete it. So that the emphasis here is on completion. Somebody would have to complete it, or part of the spirit would be left behind. And she said that includes, she said, if you're a weaver of rugs, if you're a weaver, you can't let something not be finished. So you have to ask someone at this potlatch dinner, would you finish this for me? If you're a songwriter, you pass on your songs to someone else and say, you can continue singing my songs. If you're a woodworker and there's something you were building or carving, you have to find another woodworker and say, will you finish this for me? Because I can't allow myself to go on without this being finished. And when you take care of everything at the physical level, your debts, your acts of creation that now you can see will have completion, then you move on to the next level, which is to complete your conversations that you need to have, to complete the thoughts you need to say, to complete your relationships. That is the symbolism of this. If I turn to the sacrament, for example, of the last rites, it is about completion. Is there anything left to say? Is there anything left? Is there anyone left you want to speak to? Is there anything you want to say you're sorry for? Is there anything? Where are the fragments of your soul? Make sure you are all together. Or what? Now, as someone who studied and was deeply immersed in Catholic theology, I have never come across a teaching ever that, or you will become a ghost. I can honestly say I have never seen such a teaching ever in Catholic theology, or in any actually Christian theology, or in any um, Jewish theology. I've never seen anything like that. But the emphasis on completing your life, the emphasis on living life by becoming empowered in such a way that the decisions and the choices you make do not fragment you, do not scatter you, do not shatter you. So that as the years go by, you are not constantly, and I choose this word deliberately, haunted by things you've chosen, unfinished business, regrets, that in fact you can consider fragments of yourself that are left spinning in the orbit of this lifetime, that you need to pull back and reconcile in some way, in some way. I think that if there is such a thing as the way the invisible life and this life mirror each other in certain ways, I think look at the way we are haunted by, psychologically and emotionally haunted by choices we make that do not, that in perhaps acts of betrayal, self-betrayal, betrayal of someone else, deceptions, all the ways in which we make decisions about the use of our life force that result in catastrophic consequences. It could be psychologically catastrophic, emotionally catastrophic, spiritually catastrophic, because they've shattered us. They've negotiated our power. And you don't forget that. Your soul does not let you forget that you've shattered it. You know, there's so many teachings about the role love plays, right? I mean, every tradition, everything is about love, be loving, be loving. Because it is through the eyes of love that decisions and choices are made that do not fragment you. And they don't fragment others. You don't make choices that create human shrapnel or psychological shrapnel. You you bless others because of the choices you make. When back in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, the spiritualism movement really, really expanded. That was the movement like with Houdini and with seances and with table movings and Ouija boards and all of this kind of thing. And people were captivated by trying to contact people on, quote, the other side. Like they do now, they still do now. I know people whose profession is about saying, someone's name here start with an M, start with a W. Yeah, W what? Yeah, got it. Well, picking up people from the other side, and we're fascinated with that. And I've been around that, and I've watched people do that. And the interesting thing to me, and it's just the way my mind works, I guess, is that when they've had the opportunity to be the one chosen and speaking to the person who's the quote medium or whatever, and the person will say, I think it's your father here, I think it's your brother here, I think it's whatever is here. And they have a message, and the message is, don't worry about this and blah, 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 blah. But never have I heard someone say, could you ask what heaven's like? Could you ask, does it matter if we live a good life? Could you ask that question? Could you ask that? Could you ask if they have a sense of reincarnation? They don't ask any of the major league questions. Nothing. Nothing. They ask these silly little things. Oh, he's happy. He's happy over there. Wow. Oh, good. Oh, wow. Oh. Anyway, but these seances and Ouija boards and the spiritualism, this is all this playing games with, I'm sure there's something over there, maybe, but, watch us move this thing. So this idea, and these movies about being spooked by stuff on the other side, and ghosts and hauntings and exorcisms and demons and all this other kind of stuff. And people pay to be scared. People pay to go to these movies to be scared out of their minds. And yet, try and have a conversation about, well, you obviously think there's something going on in the invisible world. Does it occur to you that there may be a sacred dimension to the invisible world? I don't believe any of that stuff. But this you find fascinating. Huh? Well, anyway, are hauntings real? Yeah, I think they are. I do. I think, and I have no proof, mind you, but it's like spiritual logic to me that if there's such an emphasis, as there always has been in these traditions, of finishing your unfinished business, of living consciously, therefore dying consciously, then I think there is some degree of truth about the fact that a soul can feel incomplete upon leaving. Upon leaving. I think, look at how many rituals there are, whether in the Buddhist society in China or Japan or what, that where the prayers for the ancestors go on. Praying for the ancestors, praying for your journey on the other side, praying that you continue a journey in light. These traditions, I don't think come from, we've got nothing else to do, let's make something up. They come from experience born of people who had sight, who said, this is what we need to do, because we go on. We go on, and how we live here matters there. We go on. Creation continues. We simply shed the shell, but creation continues. So it does matter. It matters a great deal. So I think, likewise, it matters if someone's murdered. It matters if there's a sudden death in a violent way and some soul feels like, whoa, what happened here? I think a soul can end up in a position of in between worlds, in a purgatorial state, in a state. I think that's possible. I really do. I think the invisible world has a dimension that is quite chaotic, and it's light filled, but it's chaotic. Yeah, I do. I do think that. Do I think there is life after death? Of course I do. I think you've got to be crazy not to believe that. Of course there is. Of course there is. And I think that inviting ghosts into your life, I don't do Ouija board, and I don't do things like that, precisely because I do think the atmosphere is filled with travelers, invisible travelers. And I don't want to invite them in my home. And I don't want them in my life. And so I don't think it's coming from superstition. I think it's coming from a healthy respect that life and death are acts of consciousness, and that there is a there is a truth to the archetype of the ghost. I think a place can be haunted, and I think it's really possible that when I walked into a place one time. I remember I was, what do you call it, house sitting. This is when I was in graduate school, and this place is in Chicago. There's a beautiful home, beautiful, beautiful home near the DePaul area in Chicago, if you know where that is. And from the moment I got in there, I started to get sick. I started to get stomach problems. I started to feel like I had the flu, this kind of thing. And this was in 1975. And I stopped. I couldn't go to work. And so I couldn't go to work the next day. But every day I felt worse and worse. And finally, it got to the point as the week went on that I thought, I've got to get to work. I'm going to lose my job. I've got to get to work. And so I worked probably 4 miles west of where I was staying, maybe 3. And I got in my car and I just decided I'm going and I'm driving. And as I'm driving, I'm feeling better by the minute. By the minute. I mean, and I thought, what the heck? So I got to work and I thought, I'm done. I walked back in the house and instantly I thought, oh my God, I'm so sick again. That night, as I was going to sleep, I hear a voice that has always kind of been my guiding voice, and it said, leave now. And I shot up, I swear to God, I grabbed all my things, and I ran down the stairs to the front door, and then I remembered that I'd left my hat upstairs. And I turned around and I looked at the top of the stairs. I didn't see anything, didn't see a thing, but I knew that if I went up there, I was gonna get pushed down the stairs. I knew it. I felt it. I felt every single thing in me said, "Get out now." I got in my car. I drove to my parents because I stayed with them during graduate school. And by the time I got there, I was fine. I was absolutely fine. And the other one I will tell you is I stayed in this mansion home kind of place in Poland. My Polish publisher brought me through. And I brought my mom because I wanted to take her to the villages where my grandparents were born. So we get into this building, and that night in my room, this place used to be a mansion, so they converted it into this hotel. And the room I stayed in had once been like a ballroom. It was gargantuan. And they set it up with 2 twin beds, and then all these, these ceilings were, 22 feet tall, a little seating area way over there, and these portraits. You know how they painted them in the 17 and 1800s with these men with their dogs and their swords and they're standing, but the portraits are like 5 feet long and they're leaning over from the wall looking at me, right? And I felt so weird in that place. So weird. Now, here's Catholic disclosure. I never travel without holy water. I always have holy water. So I turned off the light and I thought, something's in this room. Something is in this room. And I turned on the light. I didn't see anything, but I felt it. I felt as if something dark and horrible was at the foot of my bed. I couldn't see anything. I took the holy water out and I put holy water on my bed. And I still didn't feel safe. And then as the night wore on, I started to get sick. I started to get bathroom sick. I thought, something is horrible here. And it turned out that my mother, who was sleeping in a room upstairs in this place, felt so eerie in the place, she didn't even take her clothes off. She slept in her clothes. And the next morning, the gentleman who was hosting us said, if you want to see more of this area of Poland, I'll take this place for another night. And we said, no, 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 no. We want to go. And I said, give me the history of this place. And as we drove out of there, both my mom and I returned to health. We both felt much better. And he said, well, it had been taken over by the Nazis, resided there during World War II. And it was used as a prison and torture and all kinds of, so who knows what collective ghost memories were there or who was still there. But I could feel it. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Which leads me to just close this way, which is we have a fascination. And so, like Halloween time, and you see all these ghosts around, and I think there's some part of us that really wants to pierce the veil between worlds. And somehow pierce it in this cartoonish way, this Halloween way, this ghoulish way. Because I don't know that what it is where people fear the contact with angelic forces, but seek out ghosts. It boggles my mind. And the only thing I can conclude is that when you're dealing with spirits that are haunting, there's no consciousness. It doesn't change you. It doesn't challenge your moral code, your ethical code. It challenges nothing. It doesn't haunt you. But if you were to have an encounter with a sacred force, say an angel, or something sacred like that, you'd really have to reconsider how it is you saw all life, how it is you saw every human being, what was right, what is wrong, what is a worthy choice, and what is a worthy path for your life. So, ghosts are that level where you can play with the next world, but keep it at a distance. Thank you, everybody.